Yeah, we're live, 7:04. So pretty close. you know, just setting some stuff up, setting up some dyno data because I'm all about the dyno data. Like to look at that stuff tonight. Hopefully, you guys are doing well. It's supposed to get cold tonight, and tomorrow also. I think we might get down maybe below freezing, which would be cool. And we're supposed to get rain, so maybe we'll get some snow. We'll have to see. It'll be interesting. But tonight we're going to talk about fast intake manifolds, and because I'm writing a story for the guys at Summit Racing about a fast test that I did, and then it got me thinking, hey, how much RPM have I run with these manifolds before? We know from our discussions many times on this channel that long runner intakes tend to make power at a higher or at a lower engine speed than short runner manifolds do. And the fast still, even though it's better than like the factory truck and the Trailblazer SS and the LS1, the LS2, the LS3 is another story because right now we're talking about cathedral stuff. But the fast in terms of these long runner style manifolds, and this is a position that kind of holds with I also have hold the atomic intake manifold kind of there as well, although the atomic intake manifold actually seems to want to run a little bit more engine speed than the fast does. And it loses some power in the middle part of the curve, at least if you go by the testing that I did on the 6-liter, on the big intake test, where we ran those two. The atomic the MSD was down a little bit in a couple of spots, a couple of humps that we saw there, a couple of resonance humps on the fast manifold, but did seem to equal it or maybe even slightly take over at the very top of the engine speed. But it got me thinking, because I've run the fast, and actually every version of the fast, the original 78 millimeter one, the 92 millimeter one or 90 millimeter one, and then obviously the 102 millimeter. And I've also run both the Lsxr versions and the Lsxrts. And the RT, in case you don't know, stands for truck. It's not really a truck manifold. So we need to get that out of the way right off the bat. For you guys that think that the Lsxrt is a truck manifold, the only thing that might make it a truck manifold is there's a lot more hood clearance, and you might be able to fit that manifold in a truck. You could fit the other one too, because it's, the hood clearance issue with the fast manifold has been well documented. And obviously you want a manifold that's going to fit in our low hood lines like the Corvette and the Camaro and stuff. The Lsxrt, the big one, the tall one, will not fit, but it is by no means a truck manifold. So let's get that right out in the open, and because a lot of guys still think that that's the case, because that's kind of the way that it's marketed and even named, obviously. But here's the thing: if you run a back-to-back test with a fast Lsxr and an Lsxrt, both 102 millimeter throttle bodies, the power curves are almost identical from top to bottom. Nowhere is one of those like demonstrably better than the other one. So there's not a big change in what these things do. In fact, I've taken the lids off of them and just did a plenum volume change with the same runners. And again, that was another plenum volume test that I did, showed little or no change in power. Like when we change runner lengths, there's a significant change in power. So on the adjustable fast, where we can run the short, medium, and long runner manifolds, there's a big change in power when you change runners. When you change the plenum volume, and it's a pretty significant change in plenum volume, going from the very tight, low Lsxr version versus the Lsxrt, they bolt onto the same lower. And so all you're doing is adding plenum volume, same 102 millimeter throttle opening. But again, almost no change in power from that plenum volume change. So that thing by itself is not really much of a change. And also the rest of the manifold, since they share the runners and stuff, at least they did when I did that test. But I've run the back-to-back, the Lsxr and the Lsxrt, I don't know, half a dozen times now. And every time that I've run it, they just do the same thing. So now I just use them interchangeably. For me, it's just more a matter of what I have on hand, and is easy to test with. I think Westech has both of them. So it's really easy for me to test with them. And they do the same thing. So it doesn't matter, guys, I don't know, they got it wrapped around in their head that, that's the truck manifold, that's the low RPM one. No, they both do the same thing. They both make peak power at the same engine speed. They both make peak torque at the same engine speed. They both have exactly the same curve. So to me, they're the same manifold, regardless of whatever the shape difference is. When you look at them externally, they make the same power on the dyno. And that's really the thing that I'm concerned about. So what I was thinking about today is, we're going to go to our poll, our Polski. On any LS motor. So have you ever run a fast Lsxr or RT intake on any LS motor? Any size. I don't care what it is. Have you run that? Have you run that manifold? So when people ask me, Richard, what is the, what is the best manifold? Obviously, I have many questions after they ask a question like that, and you can tell from when people have made comments and they're asking something. I usually follow that up with a question, because the one question that they have is usually it's not quite as broad as thoughts, but it's usually a fairly broad question. What's the best turbo? What's the best camshaft? What's the best intake manifold? Okay, we can get to that, but we got to narrow stuff down. You want something specific for your combination. Let's get to that. What is that? Is it a stock converter? Is it idle quality? Is it all these things? Once we narrow that down, we can, hone in on a manifold choice for you. For some guys, they want to run at 8,000 RPM. Fast manifold is not a good intake manifold for 8,000 RPM, any more than a short runner low ram or BTR intake manifold is a good manifold for 3,000 RPM. They're just not. The runner lengths are not conducive to making power in those RPM ranges. Most guys that pick those manifolds for the RPM range that they're going to run them in, and they should. So in the test that I did, I did this on the 5.3 with a hot rod cam, which is enough cam, especially in a 5.3, to take advantage of what that intake manifold has to offer. So when we ran that on a 5.3, we made peak power at around 6,600 RPM with that hot rod cam. So it was a 5.3 stock 799 head, because that's very important, and then the hot rod cam. So what I did was look up a number of other combinations that I ran that fast manifold on to see where this thing kind of wanted to make peak power with the different displacements. And if we start with a 4.8, which is what we think that would be the highest RPM, it is. When I ran that 4.8 with a ported head and a 224 cam, that 224, 232 cam that I run a lot used to run a lot. I don't even think I have that camshaft anymore, but that was a good cam, especially a good combination of drivability and all that stuff and power. But in a 4.8, it'd be a converter cam. You'd have to put a different converter in it. But with that 224 cam, ported 706 head or a 205 trick flow head, and the fast Lsxr intake manifold, 1 3/4 headers, and the 102 millimeter throttle body, that combination made peak power at 7,000 RPM. It did that again with a slightly bigger cam and the Lsxrt, I think. Either one, they're the same. And a 228 cam, which I ran on the first Big Bang motor. That was not a great cam. That was a pretty narrow split intake to exhaust. It was an old load it was just a cam we had laying around. It wasn't something I chose specifically for that. And it was not a turbo cam, and yet made 1,200 horsepower. Because, you got to have a turbo cam to make power. Then I did some looking up on the 5.3. In addition to the 5.3 L33, we ran some other ones, and they all seem to be in the 6,600 to 6,700 RPM range. Again, 224 all the way up to a 231 cam with that fast manifold. And then the difference kind of being that when we had ported heads on them, they tended to make peak power 100 or 200 RPM higher than they did when they just had as cast heads, which is not surprising. And we might see a difference. I didn't go this deep down this rabbit hole to see if there was an 1 3/4 versus 1 7/8 header. Because of the primary lengths are similar on the ones that we have, I wouldn't think that would be the case. But, if you're trying to really look and microscopically view this thing, 100 RPM, we can't see 50 RPM because our designations are given every 100. We could probably reconfigure that, but I'm not looking in that much detail because I don't know what the variation run to run would be. Maybe it's already 50 horsepower or 10 or 20 or whatever the number is. But at any rate, with the 5.3 tended to make peak power a little bit lower than the 4.8, and that's kind of exactly what I expected. Now, this is where I find information, even going back a decade or so, where I rediscover things. And that's good. You learning is there's, there's no statute of limitations on learning. There's no time frame for that. So I took a look at the 6-liter that I did for the Big Bang test. So the 6-liter had really good cylinder heads on it. It had airflow research heads on it. It had forged rods and forged pistons, stock crank. It was I think it was an aluminum block, an LS2 block or something. And then we ran the fast Lsxr intake manifold on it, 102 millimeter throttle body headers on it. But the one thing that it had, initially when I was looking up the data, it says it had a 231 cam. It says it has that 469 camshaft in it, or the 459 camshaft in it, but it actually did not. And this is how I figured, this is one of the ways that I figured this out. I remember once we see this data and I'm reading through it, it makes me remember the things I was going through while I was there putting in this data. And I honestly didn't remember which camshaft it was. In reality, that's not a 231 cam. It's actually a 239 cam. So it's the next step up in camshaft. And the reason that I chose that, it was 2 reasons. One is because I wanted to tax the intake manifolds. I wanted to show what the difference that the intake manifolds, what they could support. So the more powerful the test combination, the more we'd see differentiations between the intake manifolds. Also, because I had a built short block, it was built to the hilt, pro-built, balanced and blueprinted. But the important thing was that it had these either CP or Molle pistons in it that had valve reliefs in it. So that allowed me to be a little bit more liberal with my cam choice. So I could pick a big camshaft in it, which would help me make the power that I wanted. So we picked a 239 cam, and I had a couple of those laying around back then. So we know that we put that camshaft in there, and it worked very well. But with that bigger camshaft and the fast manifold on the bigger 6-liter, this combination made peak power at 6,900 RPM. But what we see, basically, even on these small motors, is that 7,000, even 71 or 200 on an NA motor at any rate, seems to be about where those things want to make power. More displacement is going to bring it down. But what we see happening here is not a flow rate thing. What we see here is a reflected wave thing. And this is where the resonance tuning of the intake manifold comes into play. And this is where it wants to run at, and this is where it wants to make peak power at. The nice thing is that if you team this with the camshaft and the cylinder heads like we did in a lot of these combinations, you're going to run into a combination that works really well. So going with a 260 or 270 at 50 camshaft and that manifold is not going to work very well. You may extend the RPM range, but what you'd be doing is having a camshaft that wants to run outside the much higher than the effective operating range of the intake manifold. So it's not a good choice. So then what you'd want to do is now rethink your intake manifold. And that's why that kind of thing is really why I do adjustable manifolds, because we can find out where they want to be. When we do that, if we were to shorten the runner length and improve the flow, make it a dual, make it a cross ram, whatever we want to do to make it fancy, if we did that, we would also lose power down low, because when you shorten the runner length, even if you have the right cam for your intake manifold and your cylinder heads, your cathedral port or rec port heads or whatever they are, even if you have the right camshaft for it, #wrong-cam, you're still going to lose power down low, because that's what they do. No amount of cam is not going to make that happen. They don't do that. You can wiggle that a little bit because the reflected wave is initiated by the opening point of the camshaft, but still, it's just, the runner length is going to do what the runner length does. It takes a certain amount of time for the wave to travel at the speed of sound up and back, and for rarefaction to occur and all that to happen. And so there is a limited RPM range where these things are effective and where they're dramatically improving cylinder filling. They're basically producing a supercharging effect, and we see this. So in the test that I did recently on the L33 with the BTR hot rod cam in it, we see that the fast manifold was better than the standard truck manifold by 24 or so, a little over 24 horsepower, as much as 25 if you measure it out at the top. But it was really only better from 5,000 out to however high we revved at 67 or 6,800. If we would have gone to 7,000, it still would have been a lot better out there. In fact, it probably would have, the truck manifold would have probably fallen off at a quicker rate than the fast did. Fast probably would have carried a little bit better, especially on the 5.3. What we didn't have on that particular motor, we had 799 heads, which flow pretty well, better than a 706 head does in terms of flow, but they don't flow like a ported head does. And the ported head would tend to carry things and make more power as well. So we're going to take a look at that later on and see, because with the fast manifold and that red hot cam, we were able to make 400, a little over 480 horsepower, 480.7 horsepower. So the goal obviously is to get to 500. So with the cylinder head, we think we can do that. And Brian Tooley right now is working on a head because he's had a set of my heads for a really long time. They're a set of Ascast 220s, and now they're going to be Ascast a la Brian Tooley. So what we're thinking about doing is milling them and then having him work a little bit of his magic on it and put those on. And we kind of would like to get the goal would be to get to 500, but with the smaller hot rod cam, which would be really cool, because then we'd have, all that bottom end and plenty of like top end power. So that would be an interesting combination. But as we see, when we go up, when we change displacement, we're changing the effective RPM range. But even at that, we still see, 65 to 7,000 kind of the sweet spot for that. And also it shows us that unless you're concerned with power above 5,000 in this case, the fast manifold's probably not a good buy for you. You could get some of that with the Trailblazer SS, which would might be in the middle of those two, scaled a little bit toward the truck away from the fast manifold. The fast is a good bit better than the Trailblazer SS, but the Trailblazer SS would get you some of that. And what I get are comments all the time when I do this test. I'm sure that I'll get this comment a lot when the story comes out for the guys at Summit for on all cylinders. I think is where they show that online. But what we'll get is, but that one you had the stock throttle body on the truck manifold. I'm like, yeah, because the opening in the truck manifold is the size of the stock throttle body. Putting a 102 millimeter throttle body on a 78 millimeter opening does nothing. In fact, it could possibly make things worse with the big edge in there not working very well. Might not do anything, but it's not going to help. The only way that it possibly would help is if you had a tapered like spacer between the two where you did a nice venturi out to the 102 millimeter opening. But again, waste of time when your opening in the manifold is only size for that size throttle body. So what we could do is have a better throttle body or a radius entry, which I think would definitely help that application. Unfortunately, not a lot of guys could run a radius entry on an NA motor for one reason, that they would be drawing in very, very hot, like behind the radiator air, which would negate any of the gains that they have. You'd be much better off going and getting cold air. But you can, at the end of your big 3.5-inch tube or whatever, put a radius entry on that. And we do that all the time. That also helps. So we'll see what you guys got going on. We already got our poll up. How's our poll doing? 86% saying no, that they have not run a fast, only 14%. I'm surprised that the fast isn't, maybe not everybody is an LS guy, so maybe that's part of the deal. Let's see what we got going on. Washington State's in the house. Florida. Minus 27C in Alberta. That's okay. You win, squirrel. Or the squirrels are hibernating, I'm guessing, right? I'm looking at 12 inches of snow. Stan, you're not a fast fan? Bunkered in here in Minnesota. Yeah, we can't complain about being cold here in California, really. I'm in shorts, but they're my long winter shorts, though. Vacation in British Columbia. I do like British Columbia. Good skiing up there and Sasquatch. 2 feet of snow fall between last night and this afternoon. That have to make it really hard to go work on cars. I remember going back to Buffalo in the snow, and I went to do a story for the magazine that I was working for. And we went back there, and I'm like, this would be miserable to work on a car in. I was like the Holley high ram intake. I just couldn't afford it or use the upper RPMs where it shines. Yeah. And it's a hood clearance thing. And the tunnel rams are really cool, which is what that is. The sky ram. I need to do a double sky ram or something. The T just meant tall, yeah. Anything can fit with a Sawzall, yeah. I chose an MSD Atomic. They are good. Like I said, they work well. I need to sit up straight. I need to improve my posture. Yep. Gamer, it does stand for truck, but it's not a truck manifold. I'm running a Summit fabbed and Access EFI. Okay. It's sort of ironic. I just ordered a fast and the Nick Williams throttle body. Yes, I have the Lsxr 102 on an L76 with a precision. Nice. So that's got to be a good combination. That's a 4-digit combo. Goat life. LS6 came on my goat and will stay until I get an LSA. That's good. The LS6 is a good intake manifold. It's better than the LS2. It's better than the LS1. It's probably better than the truck, but not as good as the Trailblazer SS. Yes, we are live, special agent. Fast is money. LQ4 turn 408, only wanting 6,300 RPM. Fast is really good on a 408 also. What's the difference between the 92 throttle body and the 102? What's the difference between throttle body size, or what's the difference between the two intakes that take those respective throttle body sizes? I don't know if I've tested the 92 millimeter intake and the 102 millimeter intake, and the 102 millimeter intake makes more power. I don't know if the lid part of it is interchangeable so that you can put a 102 lid on the 92. And if the runners are all the same, I'd have to do some research to find out if that's the case. What do you think about the Sniper EFI manifold? It's tested in the big intake test. I've run it many times. And if you take a look at the LS3, I tested, they had 2 versions of the rec port, and maybe they have 2 versions of their cathedral port one now. They only had one back in the day, but they had a short runner one and then a slightly shorter runner one. And what they do is lose power through most of the curve and then gain power at the top. Robert wants to know if anyone knows why a 5.3 PCM would only be putting out 3 volts to the crank sensor. Everybody hit the like button. Yes. Finally, just got the fast Lsxrt manifold for my Gen 353. Only thing I'm missing is a fuel rail, right? Yeah, the fuel rails and the injectors that you need for that particular combination make it kind of a spendy deal. My MSD Atomic pulls to 7,200. The fact that the motor revs there is not the same as it making peak power there. For instance, on these motors, this thing made 590.6 at 6,900 and 588 at 7,000, 590 at 6,800, 588 at 7,100. So you probably from behind the wheel would not be able to feel that. But the dyno tells you where peak power actually occurs. And most people rev these motors past the power peak when they're racing them so that you can get the top of the most average power production. I think you can run the fast Lsxrt manifold on stock injectors, but if you have stock injectors, first off, you're putting a fast manifold on your combination, you probably already have a cam in it, because you shouldn't be putting a fast manifold on an otherwise stock one. And so if you have a cam in it and a fast manifold, you can't run stock injectors because they're going to be too small. You're going to be making too much power. Really hope I'm seeing a difference when changing to a fast Lsxrt with 102 big mouth. Currently have a Trailblazer SS manifold with a Holley Sniper 92. It will make a difference. I don't know if you're going to be able to feel the 10 or 15 horsepower difference. We'll see. Nova, I did try to answer your question, and I don't know what that part number is. What I do is we go to the Felpro catalog, and then I go up in the rafters and see if I have anything that will work on the Gen 6 stuff. Shane, I've got a question about my 72 Nova build with an LS carb and a tunnel ram setup. Can I get in touch with you outside of this chat? Is it a question that you can't ask during the chat? Because we've got a lot of sharp guys here, and it might be better to get more than just my opinion on something. Although mine will be 100% right. Not. Gamer, what's up? I'm going to get to you in just a second. I'm just scrolling back to see if let's see. Is $1,100 for an intake horsepower per dollar a reasonable investment? That's the money thing is only up to you. You have to decide if whatever gain that I show you is worth whatever it costs to get that gain. I can't decide that. Only you can. I would never put a fast manifold on a 5.3 if I'm going to run boost on it, because you don't need it. You know, that $1,100 is just one more pound of boost, or a pound and a half, or 2 pounds. Even if it's 2 pounds, it's probably going to be more like a pound. So if you're running a boosted deal, you don't need that intake manifold. Gamer, let's see. Thank you very much. Have an L76 stock crank, 4 rods and pistons, 6125s. Nice. Weisco's. Split the sleeve on number 7. Can I shove those internals in an 05 LQ4 without any issues, or should I find another aluminum 6-liter? You can just check the bore size of the LQ4, and as long as you have the piston to wall clearance, it will work just fine. Missed the live blow-through carb chat. Would love any information on the fast 4150 throttle body used for the blow-through setup. I don't know about running those 4-hole throttle bodies on blow-through applications, because I think I've only ever done one of them, but I'm told that they work. I just haven't had good luck with those throttle bodies, even on NA combinations. So it concerns me a little bit to run them with boost. Gamer, and I don't know, and I know I don't have to super chat, but I appreciate what you do. Thank you, and I appreciate it, and I will put it to good use. Getting snow, they're getting snow in Victorville. Wow. Wisconsin by Lake Geneva, this crazy storm. Do you ever do endurance testing at high RPM to test durability of components? Not on the engine dyno. I don't like do a long-term test. The guys at West Tech have, because it's their dyno, and they've done some stuff with some companies where they've run, you know, hour, 2 hour. I want to say they've done 24-hour stuff, but it's not 24 hours steady state. Putting an LY6 in a 68 Firebird. Awesome. Best car cam with stock springs and rods. Are the truck car cams the same? You don't, it doesn't matter what the designation that they give to the camshaft. All you're looking for is a camshaft that makes power in the RPM range that you want it. An LY6, I would put you need to let me know again, because I have questions. What transmission is it? What gearing is it? Do you want to run this thing up to 6,500 and make power up there? Do you only want low speed torque? Do you want a stock converter? What are the things that you want? Stock springs are going to be an NSR cam, and I'm not going to recommend stock springs anyway. At the very least, put some new Lsxr 550 springs in it. But then if you want to stay with that low lift, no springs required kind of camshaft, look at a Truck Norris NSR cam. Yep, I've got my winter shorts. They're long-ish. My legs really don't get that cold. And I've got to get up in the middle of the night several times and go outside with the dogs. And it's really cold then. Not Wisconsin cold, California cold. I'm using an Amazon Sniper knockoff intake. Yeah, they're all the same. They're all the same manufacturers over in China. Water meth nozzles right into the top of it. Hopefully help distribution. 3,200 RPM converter, so not too concerned with the losses way down low. Okay, so this was the, let's see. Brandon, this was the LY6, right? Oh, no, that's Brad Hayes. Okay. I have already tested the short runner stuff a lot. We know what they do. Good thoracic extension helps promote good posture. I'm leaning over because I'm laying on one of the handles. There we go. No, I look much taller now, and you look taller on TV. End up with an Lsxr plus a TPIS modified intake manifold. Once the engine comes together, we'll see if it works. Snow in the desert. That's actually very, very common. That's one thing that guys forget about. Like, we talk about how hot Vegas gets, but we got snow there too. Lsxr Stroker GTO 2006. Richard, do you think an L86 intake is worth a swap on an L83? It does add power, and I think I have a video up where we tested it because the guys from Brian Tooley ran that comparison on when they were doing the L83. Will an air canister help keep brakes on a boosted car? Yeah, and can you do a check valve on those too? Alan, new project, LQ9, 4-speed, stock body, 51 Henry J. Looking at that Trailblazer intake. That's a good intake. It's good. It makes power almost like the Fast, and is usually less expensive, especially if the motor that you have already came with one. We had soft hail, 330. Oh, and SAC. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, Giovanni, you want to be careful about hitting that too many times. That's a good way to get kicked out. Have you compared the Lsxrt 102 to an atomic? Yes. In the big intake test, it's already up. That video is already up. Richard, question regarding the positive displacement blower manifold runner length from another day had me thinking if I can use CMDP delete plates on a 3-valve Mustang in combo with PD manifold to make runners longer. I don't know what those are. And are they some kind of spacer with like an Emmerich plate on it or something? Northern Utah get hit hard, 2 feet standing, more that dropped. Snow in Kingman, Arizona. I replaced the crank sensor and wired in the bypass 5 to 12 volt reference, and it fired right up, but I need to replace the PCM at this point. What year Trailblazer intake on an LQ9? Does anybody know what the Trailblazer SS intake manifold? What years that came on? I don't know. I finally got my block to the machine shop, and he's retired, and I'm not taking any more jobs. Considering 5.3 LS or 6-liter, want to keep the carb set up and use my MSD 6014. I really like the idea of running a tall tunnel ram for nostalgic look. Is there a single tunnel carbureted deal? But no, but there is a, I don't think that there is, but there is a blank top that you could then put a hole in and then bolt on a carb adapter. Not an adapter, just a spacer. And then you can bolt the carburetor to that. Cords, what's going on? What's the first intake manifold you think of when you need 8,000 RPM? For what motor? Ram or dual carb only for the LS? Yeah, I don't think that they have a single carbureted one. I don't know that you'd want that anyway. on the lids that they have. I don't know how distribution would be for a central one of those. Have you seen the dual sniper EFI? I don't know what that is, though. I got a stage 4 BTR truck cam. What injectors would you recommend running? I'm thinking running flex fuels well, maybe 50s. I would just put 80s in it, because then you don't have to work. You're going to have to get it tuned no matter what injector that you put in it. So you might as well put 80s in it, because then later on you can put boost on it if you want. If you're the high RPM manifolds are all going to be the short ones. So the high RAM is one, the BTR, they have a couple versions. The low RAM, I think Texas Speed has one. All of those, the Race Sniper, all of those are going to be short runner deals. I'm in shorts and the wind made it uncomfortable. We had lots of wind last night. Could you run stock L6 with a GM ASA cam? Never even thought about running stock springs on anything. What is the lift on an ASA cam? It's a low lift cam, right? I want to see what the duration is, because I want to see how much RPM you're going to run. Uh-oh, it has overlap. We all know that overlap, that we can't run. The ASA cam is a 226, 236. So I don't know the stability of that cam. I would run better than a stock spring on that. I think the 4th gen truck intake is the same as the Trailblazer SS. If you look at them, you should be able to tell. The early truck is dramatically different than the Trailblazer SS intake manifold is. Had a 463 valve that took all the charge motion plates out, but is that an inch in a runner length? Richard, can you supply enough fuel off the rail for a 200 shot behind the throttle body? Yes, without any problem at all. So let's see let's see my thumbnail here. Oh yeah, not a problem at all. Those fuel rails will support. I'm sure they'll support 2,000 horsepower. I heard the L83 and LQ9 share exactly the same cam specs. I don't know what the cam specs are on an L83, because it's a VVT cam. Alan, if you're out in Tehachapi, do they have snow out there? I know they get it out there a lot. The Burns, the Trailblazer SS intake manifold came on the Saab too. Holley has a single carb top for their. I'm searching right now. Somebody told me they do, so I want to see it. some erasing. They do have a sniper style intake manifold, the fabricated one, with a single carburetor. Do not use that. Do not, under any circumstances, use that. So I'm not seeing the Holley stuff yet, but I'm going to go to holley.com.org. Hi, RAM. So I'm looking through the HiRAM stuff now. Looking at their lids. Going to page 2. I like the side hack RAM for the Fords. That's awesome. Maybe I need to go to carbureted stuff. I probably do. I think that this is all EFI stuff. There's a dual. There's a dual. Lots of duals and lots of plates, but let's do intake manifolds. Let's do carbureted intake manifolds. Dual plane, single plane. Let's go to HiRAM. There is a single 4-barrel for the they list one for the one's called the YN HiRAM top, but that's actually not for a HiRAM. That's for their dual quad. Let me see what this is. See, they're calling their YN, their old stealth RAM, they're calling it a HiRAM now because it's a better name. But that single 4-barrel one, if that's the one you're looking at, is not for the actual HiRAM. Alex, 85% said no. We got no big bucks. The Saab 9X Aero X had the Trailblazer SS intake manifold. I'm surprised it fit. Wyatt, how much power does that 200 cubic inch inline motor make? That'll give you a really good idea. Look at about 50% of that, whatever the NA power is. Looking to spice up an L77 Caprice. How do you feel about deleting the math? Are you turning it into a speed density? Can you do that? If the mass error meter is problematic, and the mass error meters become problematic in 2 ways. One, they become a flow restriction, depending on where you mount it. If you mount it after the turbo and you're blowing through it, less of a restriction. If it's before the turbo or the blower, or it's a powerful NA combination and it becomes, because of its flow rate, becomes a restriction, not good. The other thing that can happen is you can top out the electronics portion of it, because it's only designed to go, most of them are like a 0 to 5 volt probably. And so they top out electronics. They go to 5 volts at some flow rate. And if you're wanting it to flow more than that, which if you put enough draw on it, you could make it flow more than that. Or if you put positive pressure on it, you can make it flow more than that. And so you can top the meter out electronically. So if you're running into those problems, getting rid of the mass error is definitely an option. And then running speed density, because you can make lots of power and make it work and drive around with speed density, no problem. $70-mile-an-hour winds, that's a lot. Trailblazer SS versus the high ram. The high ram is going to make more peak power, but it's going to lose power through a lot of the curve compared to the Trailblazer SS. Because the Trailblazer SS is a long runner manifold. In fact, I can look that up right now. I could tell you exactly what it will do. Because I have that data, and we're already there with the LS intake shootout. Here we go. Final Holley dual quad, high ram. That's what it was, right? A high ram. So high ram EFI, do that. And mind you, this is on a good big cammed 6-liter, so would be even better. It would be more skewed toward the Trailblazer SS on a milder combination. Early truck manifold, MSD Atomic, Trailblazer SS. So on this 6-liter, the Trailblazer SS makes more power than the high ram from below 3,000 all the way up to 6,200. And then from 6,200 past 7,000, which is where we ran this thing, then the Holley high ram made more power. 596 by like 30 horsepower. So a little more than 30 horsepower at the top. But again, only from 6,200 to 7,200. Everywhere else, the Trailblazer SS was better. So it depends on where you want your power. Engine 3/8 for the Ford charge plates. That's not going to change power dramatically going from 1 or 2 or 3 or even 4 inches to that, adding that much. It's not going to make a big enough change, I don't think. Running an LQ4 706 heads, deep motor intake. I don't know what that is. 80-pound injectors, 90-millimeter throttle body, sloppy stage 2 cam shorties. I think I probably have something like that. Are the 706 heads stock? What's a deep motor intake? I don't know what that is. L33, stage 1 truck cam, Trailblazer SS, Tremec. I need a harness. I can't see how much it's been. $1,600 for a Holley for an NA engine and manual trans. You should be able to run that with a factory harness and stuff pretty cheap. The 5.3 LS has cans and springs, mid-rise, dual plane intake manifold, 750 Edelbrock, factory ECU. Using HP tuners, what do you think would be a good timing step up? 18 to 28. That should work. The thing's going to want between 28 and 30 at the horsepower peak. I don't know what you'll be able to get away with. Depends on what fuel you're using. Brandon, if you're going to run a stock LS3 cam, take a look at what I have up on the channel where we ran an LS3 cam versus other cams, and you'll see kind of where you are. An LS3 cam's not bad, but there's a lot better camshafts than that in terms of making power. The Trailblazer SS will be better on my 6-liter with a cam. If you're talking about compared to a high ram or something, it'll be miles better for what you're talking about than for low end with a turbo. Much better choice. A high ram is a high RPM manifold. It's a short runner deal. Not as short as some of the really short ones, but it's still a short runner compared to all the factory stuff. L3 Trans Am cars run the L92 manifold. Wonder why this manifold was selected over the LS3, or test showed that the two manifolds are equal at wide open throttle. Maybe the L92 has other advantages at park throttle. I don't know. Maybe they're available. The L92, isn't the L92 the truck manifold? Isn't that like the LY6 manifold? I've never compared an L92 versus the LY6. The LY6 is the truck manifold that I've always run. So I don't know exactly what that one does, if there's something different about it. I have a carbon PTR intake manifold. Ooh, fancy. On a Turbo 5.3 with a truck Norris cam, but I'm wondering how much lower speed power I'm leaving on the table by not going with a faster, even Trailblazer SS. That manifold's not going to be fantastic down low, but it should be pretty good at the top. But you would be better with a long runner manifold. I'm not sure what size, judging by the camshaft. Well, you could have whatever turbo you want on there. I'm not sure how much power you're trying to make. If you have the aluminum intake, those are not great. If it's that sheet metal kind of one. Trying to scroll back and see what the rest of the question was. Scrolling. I can never find it when I'm scrolling. And now I'm going down. And I'm gonna go to live chat. What do I need to pull 500 horsepower out of an LQ9 using mostly stock parts? You need cam and springs, and that's it. That is it. So we're going to go from top chat to live chat. See how our poll is doing. 85% saying no, that they have not run the fast. Interesting. So we'll get rid of that. Everybody, this, so people don't know, is a thumbs up. And all it takes is you hitting a button to do the thumbs up. So there's not very many there. So we need to see more of those. And rolling. Adrian, I thought that when I first saw that, I thought that was a hamburger in a cup. I'm like, wow, that's like an oddly specific emoji. That's pretty awesome. They're really going out there. I wanted to know what it meant because I'm not familiar with the burger in a cup, the septennial cupcake in a cup. What movie is that from? Thanks, Richard, for your live streaming. Answer my questions. Happy to help, Robert. Somebody else asked if they could get a hold of me. You can, not a problem, but it would be easy to ask the questions here. Can't wait to have a 408 rolling on the road. 408s are nice. I want to see an LS with 4 Weber IDAs on it. I've never run Webers on the LS. I don't think I've ever run Webers on any of the motors. We've only run EFI stuff on the stack deals. We've run stuff that's EFI that looks like Webers. Richard, no clicking on the audio. Well, what I did was just select the right mic. You go for a hamburger to chase the whiskey. Those go together, right? Any input on sloppy AR difference on turbos? What is a sloppy AR difference? We know what AR does, and if you have two otherwise identical turbos, we know what changes to AR do, if that's your question. Obviously, you need to do more kind of crazy testing. How important is 50-50 front to rear weight distribution on a road car? It helps a lot. It helps a lot of things. It can help, and also side to side too, also, so the thing doesn't stagger weight one direction or the other. Although you can do that depending on how many right turns versus left turns you have, and, and cheat it a little bit that way. But helps in everything. It helps in handling. It also helps in braking. Sometimes even more rear bias helps in braking, because most of the braking is done by the front brakes anyway. But if you can put some more weight in the rear, you can do that. The problem is on turn in and stuff, it tends to make the car also want to rotate. But 50-50 is always a good idea. Going with 3.9 stroke versus a 4-inch would be a wise decision in terms of engine longevity. I don't think you should be worried about that. Looking to upgrade to a bigger cam than what I got. Looking for more power up top than down low. Don't mind upgrading stock converter. What do you recommend? Wanting to push 500 to 600. Alex, is this a stock 6-liter or is this a 6-liter combination? 600 horsepower, very hard to get on an NA 6-liter. On a 408, much easier to get. 600 horsepower. 500 horsepower, very easy to get on a 6-liter. In between there, yeah, you can do that. The C8 is a little rear weight bias. That's not unusual, especially for mid-engine cars or rear-engine cars like the Porsche or the NSX. Unpopular option 50-50 is only beneficial under no acceleration and no braking, because momentum is always shifting weight away from 50-50. So why would that be an unpopular opinion? You get to have your opinion. I mean, I think actual motorsports have a different opinion, but Alex, if you're wanting to make 500 or 600 horsepower, you're going to need boost. If you're on with a 5.3, you're going to need boost. You can get to 500, and I have videos up on how to make 500 horsepower NA, but it takes everything. It takes good heads, good cam, good intake manifold, throttle body, headers, all of that stuff. Alan, hi, I'm new. What basically is a fast Lsxr versus Lsxrt intake of manifold maximum RPM? Well, that's a discussion we had earlier when this thing first started. We were talking about the difference between those two manifolds. Those are two different manifolds, two versions of the same manifold. And we were talking about how much RPM each one of those wants to run at. And it's the same, by the way. But how much they want to run at on different engine combinations, 4.8s, 5.3s, 6-liters, 6.2s, ostensibly. The actual weight distribution of the car doesn't change under braking, unless you're talking about a dynamic weight distribution. And I'll tell you how I know that is if you try to trail brake the 911 and see what happens. Do you have a video of trying to push 600 horsepower with a 5.3 with boost? Yeah, there's we have stuff that's making twice that. So 600 horsepower with a 5.3 is very easy. Doesn't even take a camshaft. It just takes a turbo. 600 flywheel horsepower is very, very easy with a 5.3. All that is a stock 5.3 with boost. If you put a cam in it, it's a 5.3 with a cam and springs and very, very little boost. So long as I have best cam, my LS2 with springs. Should I do trunnions up? Yeah, you might as well if it's got a lot of miles on it. Once you go over 100 horsepower per liter, yeah, 100 horsepower per liter is a pretty good motor. Eduardo, that's right. The gas weight changes during usage, all of that stuff. On a 441 LSX twin turbo engine making 1200 horsepower at 5300 with a Holley carb style intake with a 102 millimeter throttle body, would it be beneficial to switch to an Lsxr intake manifold? My question is, why is that motor only making peak power at 5300 RPM? Which intake manifold is it? Is it a single plane intake manifold? I don't think you would be running a dual plane on it, right? If it's a single plane intake manifold and you're only making peak power at 5300 RPM, something else is going on that's not intake related. Even on a 441, you should be making peak power past that. So something else is going on. Your boost is falling off, or your timing is falling off, or something weird's happening. Been looking for a video I thought you did that explained how much horsepower your injectors could handle. Yes. Take the flow rate of the injector, like 50 pounds an hour, multiply it by 16, the magic number 16. That will tell you how much power the injectors can support naturally aspirated. So 50-pound injectors could support 800 horsepower, NA. Then multiply that number by 0.85. And then that's how much they'll support under boost. And then multiply that number by 0.75. And that will tell you how much they'll supply under boost and E85. I'm guessing you could probably get a 5.3 to 600 horsepower. Yeah, you can. That's not an insurmountable amount of power. How much power is that? 3. So that's 1.85. That'd be pretty high specific output, but it's doable. I mean, people do over 2, so it's not unheard of. It's a really high number, but it would take a lot of stuff. It would take really high compression. It's going to take a dry sump. It's going to take lots of stuff. And it's going to be really, really expensive. Whereas it just takes you could use $150 or $200 turbo to get you there if it's boosted. Ever done any testing with the Lsxr intake manifold? I have. It's the carbon PTR intake manifold. Really, it's just a lower cost version of that. And I've done testing on that manifold. I think that they're the same. Any recommendations for a 5.3 cam that makes good power without too much chop? The Truck Norris cam is what I would go with. Not too much chop on that. The torque cam would have no chop on it, or a stage 1 truck cam. Richard, have you ever driven Formula V? I don't think I have. I've driven Formula Fords, but not a Formula V. Just picked up a 2.2 Ecotech 4-cylinder. Are they worth messing with? Yes, they have. They are worth messing with. I haven't run one on the engine dyno. So by that math, 24s would support a bolt-on Mark IV motor on E. 24s are 400-pound injector or 400 horsepower injectors. So is that motor making? Well, actually not 400. It's 300 and something on E85. So is that motor making more than that? Ecotech's had build options for different power levels, well up to 600 with every part that needs replacing listed. The PTR did have adjustable runners. The one that I tested did. It was pretty cool. And we even removed the lid and let it run as an open IR deal. Do you have any Meyer racing parts on your Mustang? I don't think I do. Meyer would be interested guest for Super Richie Marathon. How did the Formula 4 drive? It was fun. I liked it. And I ran Formula 2000s also up in Canada. And I loved it. It was fun. It really taught you how to drive, smoothly. Smooth. I haven't ever dyno tested a 2.2 Ecotech. I haven't ever run one on the engine dyno. Only seen them run on the chassis dyno. The people that I'd like to do something with are the guys at for the Mustang. I'm trying to think now. Maintain inertia. That's right. You don't want to slow down. Having a low horsepower car is a really good way to learn how to drive, because you have to be able to get the thing through the corner and minimize braking and all of those. Formula Ford is the one I was talking about, and then Formula 2000. They're little open wheel cars with 2-liter 4-cylinders in them. I think that they're Pinto motors. I used to hill climb a Ralt RT4 Formula Atlantic, and an Atlantic car those were serious cars. You're building an MR Spider for the Lemons race. Lemons race is kind of fun. The Lemons races are cool because you get lots of driving time. Driving at night's always exciting. Yep, cheap seat time. Although no racing is ever cheap. It's very expensive. Lots of fuel, lots of tire, depending on what kind of car you're driving. If you're really getting after it, it becomes kind of expensive. And then having all the people there and logistics and the food and all that. Get a 462 valve, 24-pound injectors, run E85, no problem. The 462 valves that I did were 400 horsepower NA ones, and they were heads cam intake ones. SCCA spec racers. I had one of those crash into me one time because they let us on the track on an open track practice session. They let regular cars. I was running a showroom stock GT with the spec racers, which I thought was a terrible idea. But you live and learn. I don't even run 24-pound injectors on 5-liter Ford stuff anymore. The minimum that I would do would be a 30, and a 36 would just be better. I think 36 is what I ran on mine with a 36-pound meter. And I love the Bob Atwood actually did my meter way back when, and I love the meter worked perfect. I think that might be the meter that I used. That might be the meter that I used on the Focus as well, on the supercharged Focus. And on that note, it is time to go. I've been here. I'm overtime. I'm OT, man. OT. I get time and a half. And what's 1.5 times nothing? Yeah, you guessed it. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you guys all tomorrow. Stay safe, stay warm, all of that stuff. I gotta go see the puppies.